And it got serious when he sat back down and said, Will, I can't get you out. And a real fear came over my body, like we're in trouble. And that's when we heard another humongous boom. That's the other tower, Tower One, coming down. At that point, I said, we're going to die. Because we weren't far from the globe in the middle of both towers. We actually, at this point, had both towers fall on us. We were in the epicenter. That was painful. They took me in the emergency room. They were swarming all over me. I had flatlined twice that night. Woke up the next morning with a tube in my throat. My sergeant had come out 7 a.m. that morning. We found out the following year that we're the only two people to survive from underneath the World Trade Center. Knowing it was anger. My wife, Allison, would tell me that you had PTSD from the day you got home. I was always angry. I was angry about what happened. I was angry about my injuries. I was angry about the death of my fellow officers, Dominic, Chris, Antonio, Stewie, Reynolds.
Thanks very much for sitting down with us and taking the time. Can you do me a favor? Can you tell us a bit about what you do now, and we'll talk about we'll talk about the kind of defining day in a bit.
Okay, well, my name is Will Jimeno. I'm a retired Port Authority police detective with the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. Today, I'm basically a dad, a husband, just try to be a good person. I've written 2 books, Sunrise Through the Darkness, which deals with not only what happened to me and my team on 9/11, but more importantly, the aftermath, the recovery, both physically and mentally. It's a book that I'm very proud of, that I wrote with Dr. Michael Moats, a friend of mine who's a doctor of psychology, works out of Colorado Springs with a lot of military family. And the goal of that book is to help anybody who's dealing with PTSD or any other type of darkness, whether it be alcohol abuse, drug abuse, physical abuse, you can name it. It relates all in the same realm. As well as I wrote a children's book called Immigrant American Survivor, the little boy who grew up to be all 3. And you can see the books behind me on this side. Both are on Amazon.com. All you have to do is Google my name, Will Jimeno, Jimeno. And the children's book is one as an immigrant. I share with children from around the world, as well as American kids, is my love for the United States of America, my love for people, working hard toward your dreams, and that there's going to be difficulties in your life, but you have to forge forward. And as well as I share the story of what happened to me and my team on September 11th in a manner that children can understand. But the most important thing about in the children's book is teaching children that there's evil out in the world, but together the good people are always going to overcome and never to give up. So I'm very proud of Sunrise Through the Darkness, as well as Immigrant American Survivor. And that's what I've been focusing my time and effort on, is my family, and still being able to help people, even though I'm not wearing the uniform. It's just in my blood to help people. So that's what I currently am doing.
Very good. Thanks. Thanks for the introduction. Okay. Yeah, a good place to start, I think, even before 9/11, would be your coming to America. You said it was from Colombia.
Yeah. So my parents moved to the United States when I was only 2 years old. My dad came in 1969, worked for a year, then brought me and my mother in 1970. And we settled in Hackensack, New Jersey. It's 12 miles outside New York City. So I basically have watched that skyline since I was a child. And one of the things my parents instilled in me was that, be proud of being an immigrant, be proud of our culture. But the United States is our new home. So we're going to learn English. We're going to fly the American flag. But we're going to bring the good culture, the good things from the Colombian culture to make this country a better place. And I was influenced as a child by the war movies from Vietnam, Korea, World War II, as well as police officer shows, Adam 12, The Blue Knight. And I always admired people that wanted to help other people or defend this country, defend the freedoms that I ended up loving. So that was a big impact on me. I went to Catholic school from kindergarten to 8th grade. Then went on to Hackensack High School, where I played soccer. So my upbringing, especially in a cultural rich environment as Hackensack, New Jersey, I know people talk about racism. We all kind of melted. It was a melting pot. We accepted every nationality, ethnicity, color of skin. So for me, I'm just a people person. I get along with everybody. And, and that was accentuated once I joined the U.S. Navy. After high school, I joined the Navy. I was on the USS Tripoli LPH-10, which is well, they call it the Gator Navy. We carry Marines. But I got to see 11 different countries, 11 great cultures, got to meet a lot of people. But one of the things as an American, when we pulled back into port in San Diego, I just knew the United States was the greatest country on earth. Not because we're better than anybody else. It's just the freedoms we have here, the opportunities we have here are immense. So that's something that's in my blood, the red, white, and blue. But my dream as a child was always to become a police officer. I just wanted to help people. And after the military, that's what I did. It took me 6 long years of trying because up here in the Northeast, it's a very sought after position. Great benefits, great pay. But I ended up after 6 years, and during those 6 years, I met my beautiful wife, Allison. We got married, had a little girl named Bianca, and finally got on the police force in August 2000, and then 6-month academy, and then graduated January 19th of 2001, and was then assigned to the Port Authority bus terminal in Midtown Manhattan. That's where my career began with the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey.
I see. I see. Actually, what you were saying, you mentioned briefly about the love for the country. I've noticed often that immigrants and the children of immigrants really appreciate a place like America a lot more than even some of the native born. Like often the most patriotic Americans are immigrants. Yeah.
Well, you know what? You hit the nail on the head. So I was just talking to my parents about this. I think, my parents always had the saying, if you go back to the 70s, 80s, parents were always of the mindset, I want better for my next generation. I truly feel that the American generation now, which I love very much, has had it really good. And what happens is when you have something really good, you don't know the struggles. Struggle and failures is what makes human beings better. We have a generation right now in the United States that, are blessed, really are blessed that they live in a great country. They're protected. A lot of the problems that happen around the world don't get to our shores. On September 11th, they did. So one of the things that immigrants, why they love this country, and Tony Blair, the former prime minister of Britain, said it the best. Any country that more people are trying to get into than out is doing something great. But again, a lot of the immigrants, and I understand why, we're having the border crisis. People want to come to this country because they want better for their families. And the kids here, unfortunately, have it so good, they don't really understand. So I always tell young generation, you know what? Get outside your comfort zone. Join the Peace Corps. Go to other countries to help. And all the kids that I know that do that come back with a different perspective. They realize that not the whole world has what we have in the United States.
Yeah, it's not the norm. It's not the norm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's very important that people understand this. And again, I love all the different countries. I think every country has something that is beautiful, beneficial, but people want the opportunities we have in the United States. And I think that's where we're at a struggle today, where a lot of people here were born here, have been raised here, have had very comforting things, and have not stepped out of the bubble. And that's something that unfortunately is something we need to address.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Okay, so going back to your career, you said in August 2000 you got the Port Authority job, 6 months of training. Okay, so what was your first like few weeks on the job? How did it
For
strike
me,
you?
it was great. I was assigned to the bus terminal Midtown Manhattan, so that's the largest bus terminal in the country of the United States, and actually the busiest in the world. We have basically all the transportation facilities, the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey. So for those that don't know, the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey own and operate all the major transportation facilities in both states. And the police within that department, we protect those. So that's the George Washington Bridge, the Goethals Bridge, the PATH train, the bus terminal, the 3 major airports, LaGuardia, Kennedy, Newark, Port Newark, and the World Trade Center. So the Lincoln Tunnel and as well as the Holland Tunnel. So for me, it was great. It was just something that I've always dreamed about. And being in New York City, even though at the time it's definitely safer back then than what is today, unfortunately, there was still a lot of things going on. So we were active as police officers, and I was one that was willing to work. So luckily for me, my squad, I worked day tours. There were senior officers there that were just excellent police officers, taught me a lot, and was able to have drug arrests, gun arrests, weapons arrests, as well as good things like helping people that needed medical attention, finding lost children, because unfortunately, runaways use the bus system a lot. So we have what's called YSU, Youth Service Unit. So we get involved with making sure that when we see an unattended child or a young child underage on a Monday or through Friday, when they should be in school, we grab them, and it turns out a lot of them are runaways. So we're able to help people as well. But it was a great experience for me. I was very active, really enjoyed it.
Very good. Okay. So can you do the math for me? How long had you been on the job? When nine, or by the time 9/11 came?
9 months. We graduated January 19th of 2001 at the World Trade Center at the Marriott. So we were the 100th class. So we were considered a big deal because we were the 100th class. And little did we know that we would actually be responding 9 months later to the worst attack in U.S. history. So that's something I think about a lot of times, because we graduated right inside the Marriott Hotel, which was a beautiful ceremony, and then unfortunately 9 months later we were on our way back, but under difficult circumstances.
I see. Okay. So if you, I'm sure you've gone through it a thousand times, but if you could start in the morning, I believe the first plane hit around 8:40 a.m. What time did your shift start?
Well, so on September 11th, I woke up, and why I want to tell people this is because I want them to understand that life is short and things can change in a heartbeat. But on September 11th, I was living the American dream. I had the job that I loved. I had a beautiful wife. I had a 4-year-old little girl named Bianca. My wife was pregnant with our second child. She was 7 months pregnant. And 6 weeks prior to the attack, we had just bought our first home in Clifton, New Jersey. So I woke up, regular day, went, kissed my wife Allison goodbye, kissed her tummy goodbye, went into the next room, kissed my daughter goodbye, and I literally just skipped down the stairs and took the 20-minute drive from Clifton, New Jersey to the bus terminal. Went downstairs to the locker room, put on our uniforms, went up to what's called roll call, where we're given our assignments for every day. My post was 3-5 on the corner of 42nd and 8th Avenue, so I had the front of that building, and we just went out to post. So in the mornings, what we have at the bus terminal is called the rush. That means thousands of people are coming in from New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate New York, other parts of the city. And it's just thousands of people coming through. So we're strategically placed throughout both buildings to make sure people are safe, give out information, make sure if there's a medical emergency, we can stop it, of course, stop any crime. So that morning was a regular morning, and I'm watching thousands of people come through the doors. I was looking at the doorway of the bus terminal with 8th Avenue behind me, and to my right was the corner of 42nd and 8th Avenue. I was standing under an awning. The awning ended, and outside that awning, I looked over, and Sergeant Ross, one of our sergeants, along with 2 other fellow officers, were standing out there. And you're right. I think it was around 8:40 or somewhere around there when I look over and I see Sergeant Ross kind of following something in the air like this. He's following it. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. But I looked over to the intersection of 42nd and 8th Avenue. And for those who have never been in New York City, the intersections are very large. And I saw a shadow come over and just cover it briefly. I thought that was kind of strange, but I didn't think anything of it. So I went back to doing my job. A few minutes later, our radios crackled, and they asked us all to come back to the police desk, which 8:40, our code for everybody come back, which is very rare to happen. So I started walking down 8th Avenue, across 41st Street, and hooked up with a fellow officer, Dominic Pizzulo, who graduated with me in the academy. And we started walking back through the main building toward 9th Avenue, where our police desk is. On the way there, Dominic said, something really bad must have happened for them to call us all back. And I said, yeah. So as we came around the corner, I remember looking up at our police desk, which sits high, and I could see the sergeants, the lieutenants, and one of the sergeants that caught my attention was Sergeant John McLaughlin. Sergeant John McLaughlin is a 19-year veteran at the time, was a former ESU officer, emergency service, which is like our SWAT and rescue team. And he was just a really good boss, someone I admired. And one of the things I learned in the Navy that I like to share with everybody is always follow somebody into a bad situation that know what they're doing, because your percentages of coming out of that situation are much higher, meaning knowledge is power. And he's someone that I really respected and I knew was knowledgeable, but he caught my attention because I see concern in his face. So we continued on to what's called our reserve room, went in the back, and there was a big TV set on. And New York One, which is a New York City news station, was on. And all we saw was the World Trade Center, both towers, and Tower One with a big gaping hole in it with black smoke coming out. That's when Sergeant Ross, who actually saw the plane, said, "Those are terrorists." And what sets the Port Authority Police of New York and New Jersey apart from the NYPD and our counterparts at all the municipalities in New Jersey is we do the same job as them. But what sets us apart is in 1993, we were bombed at the World Trade Center. All of our facilities, the airports, the bridges, the tunnels, the ports, they're target-rich environments. So terrorists, or as I like to call them, the cowards, what they want to do is inflict as much damage and death as possible. So unfortunately, our facilities are that. If you look at an airport or a bridge, a tunnel, there's a lot of people at one point. And they taught us in the academy that. And now it was coming true, which was really sad. So at that point, I turned around, picked up a payphone, called my wife. I actually got through that day because the phone lines were really busy, but I got through. I started telling her, hey, there's been an incident. We're not sure what's going on. She was asking me about some mutual friends that we had up in the towers. And that's when our Inspector Fields, came in and said, hey, we've commandeered a bus on 9th Avenue. We're going to call your name. Get on the bus. We're going to the World Trade Center, which is owned and operated by the Port Authority and protected by the Port Authority Police. And we're going to help our brothers and sisters in the evacuation.
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt for a second. At this stage, did you know that it was an airplane and still only one hit?
Well, we did know it was an airplane, but we really didn't know exactly what happened. Only Sergeant Ross saw the plane, and he had said it was an airliner. But again, once we got on the bus, it was a lot of misinformation at that point. And yes, at that point, there was only one plane that we knew of. But as Inspector Field came in, I just hung up on my wife, and myself, Dominic Pizzulo, another senior officer, Mike Robles, we just went. We didn't wait for our names to be called. We got on the bus. Sergeant McLaughlin got in a police vehicle, a Suburban, and led the way from Midtown Manhattan to downtown Manhattan. And usually it could take a while to get from Midtown to downtown, but that morning we just flew. We cut through the Village, downtown New York, on Broadway, and we headed toward the Trade Center. And again, on the way there, we still were trying to figure out what exactly happened. Most of us thought it was terrorists. Some people didn't think it was. But then 2 city blocks before we stopped before West Vesey Street, which is one of the streets that goes around the Trade Center, we looked to our right, and unfortunately, there was a man that was being tended to by an FDNY ambulance. 2 city blocks back, something flew back and hit this gentleman, and there was a lot of blood. And that's when the bus really, just went serious. Like, wow, this is bad. We went up another 2 blocks. We stopped and we got off the bus, and all I can describe it as is Armageddon. I mean, from where we stopped toward Vesey Street, it was just a war zone. There was nobody there except debris, unfortunately, body parts, a lot of dust, papers flying everywhere. And when I looked up at the towers, I could see Tower 1 on fire. I could see the other tower, the corner, on fire. So in my mind, I thought, okay, the first plane hit, it blew up, but deflected something and caught the second tower, the corner, on fire.
Right.
What we didn't know was when we were en route from Midtown Manhattan to downtown, the second plane had hit. So I never saw the gaping hole on the other side. So at that point, we started staging, and I remember our senior officer, Ronnie Delmar, said, look, they're jumping. And that's when we looked up and saw people jumping from the Tower 1, and it was difficult. There were people jumping by themselves. There were people jumping holding hands. And every time I saw somebody jump, I just felt like, if you take a pebble and you throw into water, you have a ripple effect. Every time somebody jumped, it was somebody's mother, father, brother, or sister, and the list goes on. And they kept jumping. And all I could think in my head is, this is when I wanted to be a cop. But you felt so small that day. Here we are with our uniforms on, our shields, our gun belts, but you felt this big. And, I try to tell people that You know, you think you're big and you're strong, but this world will show you that we're really small. The way we're powerful is when we come together. And we were just standing there watching the people jump. As they jumped, they would disappear behind building 6. And Sergeant McLaughlin at that point came running through this debris field and said, I need volunteers. At that point, myself, my classmate Dominic Pizzulo, as well as another classmate, and he had 4 years on the NYPD prior to coming over to the Port Authority, was Antonio Rodriguez. So the three of us volunteered because Sergeant McLaughlin asked, does anybody know how to use Scott Air Packs? So Scott Air Packs is the breathing apparatuses you see firefighters wear. So as Port Authority police officers, we're the first responders at the airport, the bridges, the tunnels. So we're cross-trained not only in law enforcement, but firefighting as well. So at that point, we said, hey, we just graduated the academy, 9 months ago. We know how to use them. So Sergeant McLaughlin said, let's go. So we started running toward the buildings. And I got to tell everybody, I was scared. Here I am, 33 years old, had been in the Navy, think of myself as a strong person, a tough guy, but I was scared. But at that point, I remembered my oath. My oath was to serve and protect. And I could see concern in Antonio's face, Dominic's face, but we had a job to do. People were depending on us, and we forged forward. We got to the side of the building.
I'm sorry. Sorry to cut in again. At this stage, there was 2 planes. You knew there was 2 planes, and there was no.
We did not know. We were under the impression only one plane had hit.
Okay, and there was no thought of like any other kind of attack.
No, at that point we didn't have any information. All we knew that was we were following Sergeant McLaughlin in to start rescue operations. That's all we knew. And again, didn't even ask the sergeant what we're doing. He just asked for volunteers. We said, look, we're going. So we continued on and to Vesey Street, and we went toward the side of Building 5 where there's a doorway. Sergeant McLaughlin asked me to take our hats, our PR-24s, which was our billy clubs at the time, our memo books, which you carry, run up to the corner of Church and Vesey Jimeno, throw our equipment in the police Suburban, and come back. So they were going into the building to go to an E-room. E-rooms are set up throughout the World Trade Center, emergency rooms where first responders can have all the gear they need, God forbid an emergency. I ran up to the corner. As I came around the corner, I noticed that the police Suburban had taken a piece of concrete had come down and hit it, the front end of it. And that's when I started realizing, hey, there's stuff falling from above. So I threw the equipment in and I got next to the building. But when I looked down Church Street, I just saw thousands of people just running. Again, I didn't look up. So I just said, wow, this is crazy. These thousands of people just running away. So I ran back, hooked up with the team when I came in. And for those that, of course, the younger generation, the World Trade Center were 2 buildings. They were connected by a concourse, or mall level, if you will. And in that mall level, you had shops, restaurants, businesses, and then you had escalators that would take you down to the PATH trains and subways. And through that concourse, you can reach Tower 1 or Tower 2. So that was underneath the main patio upstairs. So as we came in, we put on our equipment, and I remember us checking each other. And one of the things we promised each other was we wouldn't leave each other no matter what happens. So we agreed. At that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, come on, we're going down 1 level to the police desk to get more equipment. So we went down 1 level, went to the police desk, got in there. Sergeant McLaughlin said, get a mail canvas cart, start getting more equipment. So we got more Scott Air Packs, axes, helmets, whatever we can get our hands on. We left the police desk. I was pushing this cart. When we came back up into the concourse area, I remember pushing the cart. There was water on the ground. You can see marble cracking on the walls. But people always ask me, Will, what's the one thing you saw that day the most of? And I'll tell you what, the one thing I saw the most of was a lot of love. There was a steady flow of people coming from Tower 1, total strangers. Didn't matter what color they were, where they're from, what political agenda they had. Just people helping each other. There was a black gentleman with a white gentleman carrying a blonde woman who had a severe cut on her leg. And they're in a single file. Mind you, there are people who have died now. There are people yelling, but this majority of people are helping each other. And I remember thinking to myself, if these civilians can be this brave, we in uniform have to be 3 notches above them because they're counting on us. So we continued on, and we came to a crossroad where we could make a right and go straight to Tower 1, or make a left and go to Tower 2. At that point, we met another group of Port Authority police officers, same as us. They had a canvas cart, 5 of them. One of those officers that I spoke to that was pushing the cart just like I was Warren Stewart. He was another classmate of ours. He was a detective with the NYPD, but came over. We kind of said a couple words, and they started pushing off. We started pushing off, and I remember saying to Stewie, as that was his nickname, Warren Stewart. We called him Stewie. Be safe, and we punched each other, and they left. Unfortunately, those 5 police officers were never found, and he gave his life that day. But we continued on, and as we were going down that hallway, we met another Port Authority police officer, Christopher Amoroso. There's a famous picture of Christopher that the Daily News photographer took of him saving a lady. And very proud of Christopher. We worked with him at the bus terminal. He had been recently transferred to the World Trade Center, but he was a cop's cop. We have a saying called saying, you know, I'll go through a door with you. That means no matter what's on the other side of the door, I trust you with my life. That was the type of cop Christopher Amoroso was. You know, you trusted him with your life. And he had already saved like 4 or 5 people, came back into the building, saw us, knew us, asked to join us. And when he did, we noticed that he had taken an injury over his left eye. And we said, Chris, are you okay? He's like, don't worry about me. We just got to get more people out of here. Those are the people we were surrounded by on 9/11. So when I say the most thing I saw was a lot of good that day, a lot of love, even though in a dark, dark day. So we continued on. And when you got in front of the lobby of either tower, there were big glass revolving doors where you would go through to get into the lobby. So we stopped just before the lobby, and there was a Ben & Jerry's ice cream store to our right and a doorway in the corner. Sergeant McLaughlin told me to stay with the cart. The rest of the guys went down with him to get more equipment at another E-room, another emergency room. So while I was standing there, I got to tell you, again, that fear took over my body because I could look into the lobby of 2, and I saw people who unfortunately died. I saw people who were injured severely. I could look across toward Liberty Street and see people trying to run out. And our police officers were shooting the windows out to break glass so more people can get out. But unfortunately, at the same time, I was hearing a very bad sound. And there was sounds of concrete hitting the ground, but then unfortunately, there was a sound of human bodies hitting the ground. And I could see them coming down. And unfortunately, some of those bodies would land on other people and kill them. And as those sounds were just really affecting me, another Port Authority police officer came walking up to me. His name was Bruce Reynolds. Bruce was a shorter gentleman, bald. He was African-American. I knew him from the papers because the George Washington Bridge sits on the New Jersey side and the New York side. And it sits in the county where I grew up. Hackensack is in Bergen County, New Jersey. So we would get the Bergen County record. And unfortunately, people use some of our facilities to end their lives, like the George Washington Bridge. They jump from it. So I would see him in the paper sometimes actually saving people that were trying to jump. So I knew he was a senior police officer because at the time, to get to the George Washington Bridge, you had to have like 17 years on the job. And as he walked up to me, he was sweating. He had a Scott Air Pack on. And he said, Reynolds, GWB, George Washington Bridge. I said, Jimeno, BT, bus terminal. At that point, he said something that I needed to hear. He said, you know what, kid? It's going to be a long day, but we're going to get a lot of people home. And I needed that. You know, even 33 years old, former Navy, but I was still a rookie cop. And it gave me that feeling of, you know what? We're going to lose people, but we're going to get a lot of people home. And that's when the rest of the team started coming up. And he walked away. He said, be safe. I said, be safe. And unfortunately, he died that day. They didn't find him till the following February. But again, when I tell this story, I have to mention those American heroes that we lost that day, especially that I was encountered during that time period. At that point, we loaded up the cart, and now
I'm sorry. Just ask something. Okay, at this stage, you were seeing things falling, people jumping. Were you trying? I know there was a lot going on. Were you trying to figure out what had happened, or was there any thought of maybe of like being hit by something again? Was that?
No,
was that in your mind?
you know what? That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that question, but no, never thought about that. At that point, our job was just to deal with whatever was in front of us and get people home. Never ever thought about that. That's a great question, though. Nobody's ever, in the 20 years, almost 21 years, nobody's ever asked me that. That's a new question. But no,
Amazing.
didn't think about that. You know, I was focused. We were all focused on the task at hand. It was to, you know, get people home. But at that point, we started loading up the cart. And again, we're now standing in front of the Tower 2, the South Tower. And at that point, Antonio Rodriguez said, Will, he said, let me push the cart. You've been pushing the cart from the police that's there. If you're tired, where we get to, you're not going to be any good. So I thought, okay, teamwork. We switched positions. At this point, we're going to leave Tower 2 behind us, walk down a long hallway, make a left to go to Tower 1. So as we're going down this hallway, we stop halfway. And we stopped in front of a doorway to our right that led to an elevator. At that point, Sergeant McLaughlin was talking to some firefighters and an EMT. His radio went off. It was our inspector asking, hey, what's your location? Sergeant McLaughlin told him where we were and then said, is there something wrong with Tower 2? Because he had gone downstairs one level and saw the elevator bank starting to buckle. So as anybody knows, a structure that has something buckling on the bottom is not a good thing. But again, none of us thought, all the professionals from all the different departments, nobody ever thought those buildings were coming down, ever.
I see.
So at that point, I turn around and I'm looking from where we walked. So I'm looking back into the lobby of 2 where I can see. And that's when we heard a humongous explosion above us. And as I look into the lobby of 2, all I see is a fireball the size of my house. And I'm just standing there holding my helmet because everything's shaking like out of a movie. And remember what I said about follow somebody who knows what they're doing so your chances of getting out are better? Well, I couldn't have asked for a better sergeant that day because at that point, he saw something I did not see. As Tower 2 is coming down, it's actually pushing a debris wall toward us. I didn't see it. He did. So he thought right away, what do they do in the Middle East? They blow something up. They let the first responders come in, then they kill him again with another bomb. So he thought it was a car bomb. We never knew what was happening. So at that point, Sergeant McLaughlin said, run toward the elevator. Sergeant McLaughlin knew these buildings like the back of his hand because he helped set up the security after the 93 bombing. I had been to the World Trade Center maybe 3 times on protest, did not know the buildings. So Dominic started running because he was closest to the door. I was in front of the cart. I followed Dominic. Sergeant McLaughlin was behind me running, and Antonio and Chris were at the back of the cart, so they had to make their way toward the hallway. Dominic entered the hallway. I entered the hallway, and that's the first time I asked myself, Will, what did you get yourself into? Because I knew something bad was coming. I saw the lights flickering. I saw brown stuff, which what I know today is the building coming down. And Dominic started turning to the left. And I remember we don't leave each other. So I started following Dominic. That's when something big picked me up and threw me on my back. And everything went dark. And just concrete is hitting us. The only way I can describe it is like a million freight trains just coming down on you. So as a police officer, our first line of defense is our radio communication. So I'm on my radio, which is on my left lapel, yelling 813, which is our code for officers down, frantically saying, officers down, we're at the World Trade Center, we're getting hit with concrete. Something hits my hand, I lose my radio. I try to grab on my helmet. Things are hitting us. Something hits my helmet very, very hard and rips it off my head. I had a chin strap on, just took it off my head. So all I could do was hold on for dear life. And it seemed like it lasted forever, but then it just stopped. Found myself in total darkness, couldn't see anything, couldn't move. After a little bit of time, I noticed there was a hole above me about 20 to 30 feet up above, and there was light starting to trickle through. Everything was very, very gray. I was coughing. And at that point, I was still in shock. I didn't feel the pain begin. But what I know today was I literally had a wall fall on me, and it buried me from under my armpit of my left arm, down my chest, all the way down my left side, and then leaving my right leg up in a 90-degree angle with my knee in the air. But I was on my back at a 45-degree angle. When I looked, all I saw was concrete in this very, very small void. I looked to my left and I could see Dominic buried next to me, face down in a push-up position. When I looked toward my feet, it was nothing but concrete. So I was trying to get my bearings when I heard Sergeant McLaughlin from beyond the concrete at my feet say, sound off. Sergeant McLaughlin on the initial collapse is now buried in a fetal position and his head is stuck. And he says, what's everybody's, position? What are you guys doing? What's going on? I remember saying, I can't move. I have concrete on me. And that's when the pain started. I'm feeling pain. At that point, Dominic said, I'm buried, but I think I can come out of this. So it took Dominic a little while, but while he was trying to get unburied, I remember yelling Antonio Rodriguez's nickname A-Rod and Christopher's name. So for 2 minutes, I must have yelled their name really a lot and loudly. And that's when Dominic said, Will, they're in a better place. So at that point, we realized we lost 2 teammates, 2 cops, 2 fathers, 2 sons. And that was difficult. That was very difficult. At that point, Dominic got free. And there was only about 18 inches above me the concrete was about 18 inches above me. So there wasn't much room. There was a little room to my right where someone could probably sneak in. Dominic literally got out of his Scott Air Pack and had to crawl over my face into this small void. When he got to the right, he actually said, Sarge, I think I can go out of this hole above us. And Sergeant McLaughlin said, no, you have to get Jimeno out, and you and Jimeno get me out. And he's thinking tactically. And that's a difficult situation because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And Dominic and me had a serious discussion. He said, Will, I got a wife and kids at home. I said, bro, I got a wife and a kid at home, and I got one on the way. So after a little bit of talking, he did the right thing. He turned around and he said, Will, I'm going to try to get you out. So Dominic was a very strong individual. He started to try to take the concrete off me, but there was a piece of rebar that was wrapped around with a piece of concrete on my left thigh. On my right thigh. So he would take this piece of rebar, pull it off, but it would whip back and hit me. And believe it or not, for the next, 10, 15 minutes, he pretty much kicked my butt. And we laughed down there. I said, bro, you're kicking my butt. He's like, I'm trying, man. I'm trying to get you out. And it got serious when he sat back down and said, Will, I can't get you out. And a real fear came over my body, like we're in trouble. And that's when we heard another humongous boom. That's the other tower, the Tower 1 coming down. At that point, I said, we're going to die. So this is something I've always done to my family in sign language. I love you. So I took my hands, crossed them over my chest, because I figured if they find me, I hope they'll tell my wife that this is how they found me. So she'll know I was thinking about my family. Because up to that point, it was about the civilians, then my team, and then I thought about my family, because my job as a police officer is to the civilians, the public, then my team. And at that point, as everything's coming down, now I can hear Sergeant McLaughlin yell, because now he is actually being compressed to the point that his weapon is being pushed into his body. I'm yelling because I'm under more pain. And unfortunately, that's when I saw something fall in and hit Dominic and sit him down like a rag doll. When everything was said and done, I looked over and Dominic was profusely bleeding from his mouth. He had taken a very hard hit, internal injuries, and he was dying. And he said, Willie, I'm dying. And I said, hold on, Dom. He goes, no, I'm dying. He goes, just remember not to let anybody forget that I died trying to save you guys. I said, Dominic, I would never let anybody forget that. At that point, he asked Sergeant McLaughlin for a break, believe it or not, a 3-8, which is our code. Sergeant McLaughlin stopped the yelling, and he knew something serious was happening and said, yeah, you can have a 3-8. At that moment, Dominic took out his sidearm, his pistol, pointed it up into that hole, and fired one round as a last-ditch effort to let somebody know we were down there. See, because we weren't far from the globe in the middle of both towers. We actually, at this point, had both towers fall on us. We were in the epicenter. And Dominic passed at that point. He died, and he just slumped over. And that was difficult, to see a good friend, a good father, a good cop die literally a couple feet from me, if that. I got, to be honest with you, I was hysterical. Sergeant McLaughlin, through his pain, told me to calm down. He understood what happened. He said, focus. We got to focus. So I did. I started focusing, trying to figure out how to get out. I kept yelling, PAPD, officers down. But little did we know what happened above. We never knew. After a while, next thing you know, these fireballs started falling into the hole. And I know that what jet fuel is. You know, I was on a ship that carried helicopters and planes, so you knew how bad it was. We were taught how dangerous jet fuel is, and it started falling in the hole, and it started burning my right forearm. And I kept yelling, "Sarge, I'm going to burn alive." Just imagine there's fire rolling toward you and you can't move. All I had was a little bit of use of my left arm, use of my right arm. I had my initial handcuffs in the front and my weapon on the side. And there's nothing I could do. I was trying to throw dirt, concrete at this stuff. I knew if I caught my uniform, I'd burn alive, but it somehow, some way, these balls would fall in and put themselves out. After a while, after that, I hear pow, 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 and I look above me and I see sparks. Dominic's weapon was now firing off in my direction. So I had the remaining 15 rounds shoot above my head. And all I could do was put my hand here, hoping that if a bullet hit me, it would stop in my hand. I knew better than that. But somehow, some way, I was still alive after the gun went off.
I'm
And
sorry. This was because something put pressure on the trigger.
no, I believe it was the heat. The heat was falling near him, these fireballs, and somehow the weapon cooked off. And next thing you know, I got 15 rounds above my head. I was still alive at the end of that. I was quite hysterical. Sergeant McLaughlin calmed me down and then explained to me, reserve your energy, because the more energy we expend, it's going to hurt us. Sergeant McLaughlin was a very good leader, is a very good leader. And I asked him, Sarge, what do we do next? And he said, Jimeno, there's no book written for this. It's basically going to come down to our will to survive. He basically said they're not going to come in and look for anybody until they secure the area. So we're under the assumption car bombs went off afterwards, and it's just the debris field above us. So Sergeant McLaughlin said what's going to happen to our bodies is something called compartment syndrome. We're being crushed. After a while, your body starts to literally poison itself and the muscles start to die. And he said, if they don't get to us by tomorrow morning, we're probably going to die. That was something difficult to hear, but at the same time, I appreciate it because he was telling me exactly where our positioning was. So it really had to come down to the will to survive. And that's something very important in this story. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But at that point, we continued to fight for our lives. My body started swelling up. I took my initial handcuffs. I was trying to break the concrete. But every time I swung, it just felt like I ran a marathon. So it would take me time. But I put the handcuffs down. I couldn't feel them again. After a while, I detached the magazine of my weapon, and I used that. Put it down, couldn't find it. It was hours later that I had the strength to rock the weapon out. When I pointed my gun toward the hole to fire it, it didn't fire because at the time we carried Smith & Wesson's 5946s, which if you took the magazine out, the weapon would not fire, which protected us if we were ever in a struggle with somebody in our facilities and somebody tried to get our gun, we can dislodge the magazine. Even if they got the gun, it wouldn't fire. So at that point, my gun became a hammer. So I tried to crack the concrete, but I was tired, put it down. I couldn't find anything because at this point we had started to swell. So when they found me later, all that equipment was sitting right where I left it, but it felt like all the same. So I didn't know. This continued on for a long period of time. And as night started to fall, and the most important part to the story, I always say, is the moment that I wanted to give up. We had been crushed. We lost teammates, had been burnt, been shot at. We were dying. And I wanted the pain to stop. I wanted to die. Being Catholic, and I don't preach religion, but I'm Catholic. I thank God for 33 great years. I thank him for 6 years with my beautiful wife, Allison, 4 years with my little girl, Bianca. And I said, God, thank you to my parents who brought me to this great country. And if I die today, I'm okay with it because I died as a police officer trying to do the right thing and get people home. But I'm going to ask you for two things, God. One is somehow, some way, let my little girl let me see my little girl be born because she was due to be born in December. And the second one, which people can laugh at, I said, God, when I get to heaven, because I figured everybody was going to heaven that day because these cowards attacked innocent human beings, was when we get to heaven, can I have a glass of water? I was so thirsty. We were caked in concrete. I was just so thirsty. And I closed my eyes. And I tell people, you can call it a vision, a dream, whatever you want to call it. I see a person walking toward me. glowing white robe, no face, brown hair. Over his left shoulder was a tranquil lake with trees around it. Over his over his opposite shoulder, his right shoulder, was a tall, endless sea of grass. And a peace came over me. And this person's walking toward me, and I know it's Jesus. And what does he have in his hand? A bottle of water. I can't tell you if it's Poland Spring or what type of water, but I snapped out of that vision, that dream, whatever we want to call it, with a desire to fight. Because at that point, I realized if I give up and I died, nobody would hear my sergeant. He was buried deeper than me. I was closer to the hole. I wouldn't have fought hard enough to get home to my family. I wouldn't have fought hard enough for my country. But most importantly, I would have given up on myself. And why do I share this with people? Because I am no different than anybody listening to this podcast right now. We have it within us to overcome challenges. And there's something special that evening for me where I said, if I'm going to die, I die on my terms. You know, and people always say, Will, I can't think of anything worse than 220 stories hitting you. Well, yes, you can. You just lost a loved one. You found out you got cancer. You lost your job. It could be as simple as a child that needs to take a test and they feel they can't overcome it. We all have our own World Trade Centers. It's what we do with ourselves when we're faced with those World Trade Centers. And I'm here as a regular human being to tell everyone that's listening, yes, you can overcome challenges. Don't give up. Keep pushing forward, and you'll be amazed at what you can do. And if you don't make it, at least you know in your heart you tried everything you could. And there's a piece about that that is undescribable. So we continued to fight. Around 8 o'clock that night, I hear in the distance, United States Marine Corps. Can anybody hear us? There were 2 Marine reservists and a civilian who broke through the lines and were in the epicenter. When I heard them, I started yelling, and they said, keep yelling. They came toward me. I didn't know there was a small hole to my left, and they were shining a light down. It took 5 minutes for them to see me because as I'm waving my left hand, they couldn't see me. We had become part of the building. How? I don't know, because I was so thirsty. I had no saliva. I mustered enough saliva to right here on the palm of my hand. And when they saw my skin, they said, we got you. They sent the civilian down what they called the pile, and he bumped into a firefighter who then told NYPD, ESU Truck 1, their emergency service, their SWAT and rescue team, that we were there. Before you knew it, the cavalry came. Scott Strauss from the NYPD, Patty McGee from the NYPD, and a civilian who used to be a paramedic, Chuck Sharika. These 3 brave men digged their way down to me. Now, mind you, it was so dangerous. There was an encroaching fire. There wasn't much room to work. They literally got to me, and it was so tight that only one person at a time could get to me. And it was probably the size of, you know, what a folding chair. That's how small the space was for them to work in. So they would back out. One guy would come in, one guy would come out. Somehow, some way, me and my sergeant became acclimated to the environment we're in. These guys were choking. It was smoke-filled environment. It was hot. There were fire raging. When they got to me, you know, they started working on me. It took 3 hours to rescue me out. At one point, they couldn't get my left leg out. I kept begging them to get to the sergeant first, but they said, no, we got to get you out first. At one point, I told Scott, you know, I could see the hole. I said, just cut my left leg off, because they were ready to cut my legs off. They had doctors on standby. And he said, no, we're going to get you out. And these 3 hours, they were ordered to leave us. And these 3 brave men, they said, no, if we die, we die. If they're going to die, we die with them. They wouldn't let us go. It took 3 hours. They finally were able to extract me. And I remember as they're pulling me up, I just said, Sarge, hold on, because they needed a fresh team of people to come in for the sergeant. These guys were exhausted. When they popped me out of the hole, I remember looking around. I looked at up into the sky, and all I could see was the moon, and I could see through the smoke. I could see the clearing of the night. But I asked, where is everything? Because I didn't see the buildings. And that's the first time I realized what happened. Somebody said, that's all gone, kid. That's when I realized that the buildings both had fallen. We didn't know that. And that's the first time I cried that night. I didn't cry when we were initially buried. I didn't cry when the guys died. I didn't cry from the pain. I cried because I felt like we failed. You know, there was so many people inside that concourse area. They started sending me down the long pile. I kept grabbing patches and thanking everybody, you know.
I'm
And
sorry. I'm sorry to cut in. At this stage, I assume, I assume like the adrenaline and the shock that was preventing you from feeling physical pain, was long gone. Were you just in
no,
agony?
no, I was in pain the whole time. I was buried for a total of 13 hours in undescribable pain. When they got me out of there, I was in undescribable pain. They put me in an ambulance. They took me to Bellevue Hospital. I got out at 11 o'clock that night. By the time they got me to the hospital, it was probably a little bit before midnight. That's the second time I cried, because when they got me to Bellevue Hospital, they took me off the ambulance and there was just doctors and nurses standing around. I'm like, where is everybody? And they're like, you're it right now. And that was painful. They took me in the emergency room. They were swarming all over me. I had flatlined twice that night. Woke up the next morning with a tube in my throat. My sergeant had come out 7 a.m. that morning. We found out the following year that we're the only two people to survive from underneath the World Trade Center. There's about 18 of
Really?
us that survived. There was 13 in the stairwell. Another one of our police officers, David Lim, who was one of our K9 officers, with 13 firefighters and another Port Authority civilian. Me and my sergeant were the only two buried, like I said, underneath the building. The next day at noon, they found Mrs. Guzman, who was the last person, a Port Authority employee. So there's not too many of us that survived after both collapses. And me, Sergeant McLaughlin, Mrs. Guzman, we were severely, severely injured. But 21 years later, I think it's important that this new generation uh, understands 9/11 and what happened that day and the evil that reared its head that day, but how we came together as Americans, as human beings, to overcome that evil. So I want today the youth and this next generation to understand what happened that day, but also to understand the good of that day. There's a saying, if you don't take the light out of a tragedy, it's just that, a tragedy. And I refuse to allow that to happen. I look at the good things of 9/11. I look at, we try to go in to help people, then found ourselves fighting for our lives, and good people came in and put their lives on the line. And so many good people, not only first responders, but civilians alike, lost their lives trying to help each other. And 21 years later, I want us to learn from those events and to try to make the world a better place. And God knows we need it. Today the world seems to be at, sometimes we question, but we're human beings. And one thing that I want people to understand, we went to war. We, just ended the war last year. The people of Iraq, the people of Afghanistan, and every other place that we've ever fought, the people in those countries, they want the same thing we do. They want to be able to grow old, see their family grow, see their children be married, see grandkids. The people that govern the countries, they need to do a better job. But we as human beings, as an American, I'm very proud to say that when evil steps in, we're going to step up. That's why I love the quote by Edmund Burke, the British philosopher. All that is needed for the triumph of evil is for good men to stand by and do nothing. Well, 21 years later, there are good men and women that are always going to step up to fight evil. And that's something I want this generation and us, the older people, to remind ourselves that evil will never win, because there's good in this world. There's more good than bad. If the media would report all the good in the world, it would trump the bad stuff. It really would. And that's why I wrote the book Sunrise Through the Darkness, to help people that are in a dark place, and inspire children with my other book, Immigrant American Survivor, to let children know that they should grow up to love their countries, to be good, to overcome challenges, to follow their dreams, and to make a positive impact. Because I tell people life is short. And the example I always use is, we're born. If you're lucky to live till 90, there's 365 days in each year. Multiply 90 by 365. It's not a lot of days on this earth. When we're born, we're in diapers. If we're lucky to reach 90, sometimes we're back in diapers. So that time we have, make it something that is going to better this world. Be a positive light in this world. 9/11 showed us the darkness. I say 9/11 always showed us the light. And that's something that's universal, because every country struggles with things. So if there is anything that we can take away 21 years later, is that there's more good in this world. People need to be kind to each other. And that if you're in a dark place, yes, it's going to be difficult sometimes to recover from things, but I did. I had to deal with PTSD, and I still live with it. I tell people, whatever ailment you're going through, whether it's PTSD, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, sexual abuse, rape, These are things that we don't get rid of. These are things we learn to live with. But you deserve happiness. And that's something I really strive for to tell people. You deserve happiness. Don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. You deserve that.
I see. Yeah, that's a very good. That's a very good message. It's really it's quite commendable. That you take that you can look at the good in the situation and take positive from it. Can you talk to me a little bit about maybe like the immediate few weeks after you woke up in the hospital? What were your injuries? How bad?
So I had compartment syndrome. I was severely injured. They literally had to cut my left leg from my thigh all the way down on the side to my ankle. I lost a lot of muscle tissue. I had 13 operations. Um, I was hospitalized for many months. I went from Bellevue Hospital to Kessler Rehabilitation Institute in West Orange, New Jersey. Did my rehab there, and they told me, listen, if you work really hard and get yourself in a wheelchair, you'll be there for the birth of your daughter. And that's what one of the lights from that year was. My wife scheduled a planned C-section and had my little girl Olivia on my birthday, November 26th, and I was by her side to watch my baby be born.
It's beautiful.
But it took me several years to be able to be walking without any assistance. I still can't do everything I did beforehand, but I just find a different way to, to learn to live. And again, I tell people, no matter what you're going through, keep fighting, figure it out. As a man, I'll tell everybody, ego is not your amigo. Learn to be able to say, I need help. I had to buy different cars. I do my own laundry, so I had to get different type of washer and dryer that made it more convenient for my leg. Today, there's still days that my left leg doesn't work. I have drop foot, so I have to wear, because my nerves were severed, so I can't pick up my foot. I have to wear a brace. I can't not stand for long periods of time without my legs swelling up, so it's difficult. But it doesn't stop me from living life. And and I look at my sergeant. My sergeant took double the wounds. He lost pretty much all his buttocks, both his legs where he wears braces. Not once does that man complain. He's seen his children, two of his boys, become Eagle Scouts. Took him through Boy Scout, being the Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, and till today he has open wounds, and he never complains. People ask us, when you think you'll get past 9/11? The day they bury me. It's something that you carry, but it's not only 9/11. That's why I tell people the tragedies and the challenges that you have in your life, those are things you carry with you. But and if you're a person again who's struggling, I want you to know you're not alone. You're not alone, because I felt alone with the post-traumatic stress disorder. I felt alone with the recovery, but I was never alone. You just have to reach out and decide that you want to get better. You want to have a good life. But the aftermath was very, very long recovery, both physically and mentally. But here I am today, 21 years later, trying to be impactful in a positive way. On 9/11, I thought, hey, we're going to save the world. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to be able to do that. But I do my part to make the world a better place. And if I can help one person and that person helps another, it continues. And that's how we make our world a better place, not only within our own countries, but within the world.
I see. Can you tell me a little bit? I know it's quite personal. But can you tell me how the PTSD kind of manifested itself in you? What did you feel? How did it affect you?
Well, for me, and not knowing, it was anger. My wife, Allison, would tell me that you had PTSD from the day you got home. I was always angry. I was angry about what happened. I was angry about my injuries. I was angry about the death of my fellow officers, Dominic, Chris, Antonio, Stewie, Reynolds. We lost 37 that day, the most in law enforcement history in one day, followed by 23 of our NYPD officers, of course, 343 firefighters, and of course, countless civilians. So that was really weighing on me. And this went on for almost a year. The following year, I remember I was starting to walk, and I was just getting angry about the silliest of things. And I had been talking to the police, doctor and all that, but I wasn't really paying it mind. And I knew something was wrong. But again, as a man, I was like, I could figure this out. I couldn't. And one evening, unfortunately, I was getting upset about, I think it was the remote control. Couldn't find it. Allison was trying to find it. Now, mind you, this is my wife who's been by my side, had a baby, just love her to death. And she wasn't moving fast enough. I picked up a shoe and I was going to throw it at her. And I stopped myself like, who is this? This is not who Will Jimeno is. That's not the way I was brought up. I would never raise my hand at a woman. And I was really embarrassed. I got in my truck and I went up to the country. I'm a big bow hunter, big outdoorsman. And I sat up there in a field and just watched the deer come out. And I was thinking, something's wrong with me. I don't know what it is. I need help. And what I thought about was, if these terrorists, these cowards, make me a bad husband, a bad father, they will reach and touch another generation of human beings. And I said, I cannot allow that. I knew that people who are raised by an alcoholic parent or a drug abusing parent or a physical abuse parent turn out sometimes to be that. And I didn't want that for my children. So I sought help. And I went through a couple different people. And I think that's important for people to understand. If you're someone who needs to talk to somebody and the first person you talk to turns you off, keep searching. Because people that, whether it be a doctor, a therapist, a friend, they're like car salesmen. You're going to have to find the person that fits you. And that's important because sometimes people stop short and unfortunately take their lives because of that. And I want you to know that you can just keep trying. And finally, I met a person I consider a very good friend, someone who was always down at the World Trade Center at night, helping all the police officers, fighters, talking to them. And after a couple of years of talking to her, she said, look, Will, you're going to have to learn to live with this. And that was really mind-blowing for me. She made me understand that you're not going to cure this, but you're going to have to learn to deal with it. For me, it was anger. So if I feel anger coming on, that makes me explode. I started learning how to teach myself to take a walk, go hit a punching bag, do something physical that allows that to go out. And I tell people, I don't know what to say to someone who's depressed or has anxiety. You have to figure out your own roadmap. But what I am here to tell you is there is a map that you can find that will help you. And through that and the support of my family and the support of my friends, I have been able to put my life together. And that's why in 2010, I would talk to universities, and I was talking to a lot of military personnel when one person said, you need to write a book because your story and what you've been saying has helped me. And I want to help other veterans and other first responders and people in general. And it took me a long time to write the book Sunrise Through the Darkness, but finally came out last year after 20th anniversary. And the feedback we've gotten has been, for me, just heartwarming. I've had, just as an example, somebody told me that my book helped them. There was a doctor who works with women who has postpartum. I never thought in a million years as a police officer I was going to help women with postpartum, because it doesn't matter what the darkness is. It's about overcoming that and learning to live with that. And so the PTSD in a way has been a nightmare, but at the same time, on the reflection now, as for me to be able to live such a good life, has been a gift that I can offer other people that are going through struggles and say, you know what, again, you are not alone. I want people to really understand that. There are people out there, if you don't have immediate family members, then there's priests, there's youth, youth groups, there's groups of people that you can find that are going to be there to help you. That's the good thing. And my PTSD is something that, again, I wish I didn't have, but at the same time, I see it as a gift that has helped me help other people.
I see. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that with me. I wanted to ask. I won't keep you too much longer. I've heard that some people, when they have, when they played some kind of role in like one of these big events that instantly wouldn't make sense, that they feel the need later on to kind of make sense of it by learning about the details and this plane and that plane and this hijacker and so on. Did you ever feel a need to kind of complete like a timeline in your head?
No. I think the biggest thing was when I was in a hospital, when they brought the newspaper in and they identified the hijackers. I remember staring at their picture, and there was one particular hijacker who had glasses, and I just looked like a normal human being. And all I could think about was what would make people hate people so much. To, war is one thing. You're fighting each other. You're military. But to kill innocent civilians was something that I just don't understand. And I guess I'll never be that because I don't have that hate in my heart. I don't hate anybody. I really don't. Hatred is just just an evil thing. And you know, the only thing I could say is the cowards that they thought they were going to bring us to our knees as Americans and as human beings, because we lost over 81 different nationalities in the World Trade Center that day. I want to be clear with that. It's just not, they didn't just attack America, they attacked humanity. And I just can't figure it out for the life of me that you want to hurt people like that, you know, that you hate people so much, you know, that, you know, and again, I'm not a world leader, but you know, to stop women from voting, women from learning like they do the Taliban and, you know, these cowards. I don't understand it. You should want your country to become stronger. And you need to look at the good in people. And everybody has something good to bring to the table. You know, we might not agree with each other, but we should be able to get along with each other. But I never really thought about it as a timeline. I try not to really watch too much 9/11 material. My job, again, as a survivor, and something I promised myself, was to tell the story of my brave fellow officers, brave people that day, and to teach future generations of the evil that day, but the good of that day as well.
Oh yeah, I was actually I was going to ask you if you tended to stay away from, you know, 9/11 documentaries, news coverage, etc. I can understand. I can understand that you would want to. Yeah, and on that note, do you have any thoughts on people who perpetuate like there's a lot of conspiracies out there, whether they believe them genuinely or not? Do you have any thoughts on them at all?
Regarding what happened to the buildings?
Yeah, not if not if you believe any, but you know, when you see like on YouTube like a 9/11 conspiracy documentary, do you feel any sort of way about it?
No, because you know, the main conspiracy was that the buildings were blown up from within. Well, there's only two survivors that survived from underneath the World Trade Center. It was me and my sergeant. We were in the epicenter. The explosion came from above, and if you look at it structurally, it made sense what happened. You know, the building melted from inside, the jet fuel coming down the elevator shafts, and that I'm no architect, I'm no engineer, but when you talk to them, it makes total sense. Thank goodness the buildings did not fall sideways because it would have killed more people. They came straight down. So I guess if you look at it from an engineer point, it made sense. And again, me and my sergeant are the only two to survive from under, and I can promise you the explosions came from above. So no, and I don't pay it mind. One thing that I do suggest to people, and I have to suggest it to myself too, if I watch too much news, it could get my blood pressure up. I turn it off. On social media, I don't look at the negative stuff. I look at the positive things. So do yourself a favor instead of getting angry and wasting your time. And remember, do the math. If you're lucky till 90, 365 times 90, there's better things to waste your time on. Of course, there are important things to be educated about, but conspiracy theories is not one of the things I waste my time on. You know, I rather waste my time talking to you and putting a positive message out there to help other people, because there is no greater gift than knowing, if you're lucky enough, that through your story, because your story is important, no matter who's listening to it, you're important in this world, that your story somehow, some way was a positive impact on someone and has helped them. And when you get that feedback, there's no greater feeling that you know that because of you being on this earth, you were able to help another person. That's why I tell people, even when you're having a bad day, open a door for someone, put a smile on someone's face. It'll change your attitude that day, and understand that you're special. You know, I tell everybody this: don't ever think you're not special. Don't ever think you're not important, and you're never alone.
Very nice, very good. Just one final question: do you and I guess let me know if there was different stages of this, but I mean maybe in the first few years versus now, do you return to the actual like your exact steps that day? Is it a memory that you that you
Well,
retrace a lot,
it's
and
so
did that
funny.
change over time, the amount?
It's so funny. I was recently at the 9/11 memorial downstairs doing something, and it was always weird to go back there. But I'm also, I've come to grips that I can walk on to the memorial. Anytime I stop there, I see the names of my fellow officers. No, in the beginning it was hard, but I've always done it to do a positive message. And I'm very proud of what the 9/11 Memorial has done, because I think it's something that is important. And we have so many visitors from around the world that go through there. It's something that's a good lesson, a good place to teach good things, and never forget those we lost that day. But again, more importantly, never forget how we shouldn't treat each other, that we should treat each other better. I'm very proud of that. Both my books are carried at the 9/11 Memorial store. They sell very well there. International travelers love the books. But I'm very proud of what they've done with it. I hope it continues for beyond my life, and something that 3, 4, 5, 6 generations down people learn from. And I think it's important, not only in this country but throughout all the countries, have very important museums and things that people should really take the time to educate themselves on.
I see. I'm sorry. Just one more thing. I forgot to ask you this earlier. When you first spoke to your wife about when she found out that you were possibly at the scene, definitely at the scene, did she tell you her my God, like her timeline of feelings across this, especially being 7 months
later, because when I woke up the next day, thank goodness she was by my side. She was very pregnant. They focused first on me, just my health. They really didn't, of course I was concerned when I finally able to talk, ask her how she was doing. Yeah, it took a while. And like I said, for anybody who serves in the military or law enforcement or firefighter, first responders here in America or throughout the world, your family wears that uniform too. They're a big part of it. And I've been blessed to have a wife that is so strong, so beautiful, full of love and support for me. That was an immense help for me. You could sit down and even talk to her because she has quite a story. I tell people 9/11, we're a small slice of what happened that day. People know us because we're the only two to survive from under, and they made the movie World Trade Center by Oliver Stone. But we're just a small slice of thousands and thousands of people that were going through the same thing as my wife, hoping for that phone call. We're just one of the few people that were lucky enough to get that phone call. And what she went through is something that I would not wish upon any family. But I'm very fortunate to have her, and her strength is something that people should look up to.
That's a very good note to end it on. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it a lot. Can you do me a favor? Just remind us the name of the book, the names of the books, and where we can find and follow you.
Yes, absolutely. So the first book is Sunrise Through the Darkness, and you can just Google it on Amazon. Will
I'll put a
Jimeno.
link. Yeah.
And also Immigrant, American Survivor, a little boy who grew up to be all three. Very proud of both books. Again, they're both on Amazon.com. And it's books that will help you, and they're positive books. And I hope that people will pick them up and read them if they're going through a dark place, or pick them up to inspire their children and learn something good from it. That's what I made it for. And, I always say, I never wrote those books for any type of fame or money. What I did it for is to do what I did as a police officer. And I feel like I'm wearing my uniform by sharing those books with people. And I hope that if you pick it up, it's something that helps you, your family, your children, and I really wish everybody the best. I wish everybody happiness. And I want everybody to remember, you're never alone.
Well, thank you very much. Seriously, the positivity, the positivity that you have, even surrounding that day is incredible.
Well,
thank you very much.
You. I credit my parents for that, And remember, you might not become famous, you might not become rich, but you might raise a child that will change the world. So being a good parent is something that I highly respect, and I'm blessed to have two great parents. Make sure you're a good parent out there.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. Take care, mate.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. God bless, and take care, everybody.